There she is. It's my friend Zoom. Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome to our latest webinar. Uh, we are Chesapeake Region Safety Council. Today's webinar by Lee Watson is called Left Turn Madness, Safety Lessons from Motorsports. And I am joined here by, I would say, an esteemed panel. Yes, I would. Today I'm joined by David Medeiros, the president of Chesapeake Region Safety Council. Christy Bliss is the director, and Lee Watson will be our presenter. Just a couple of items I want to show you while you're logging into Zoom here today. First, what I'll do is we'll start by showing you where the poll button is. So as you look around your Zoom screen, stop sharing here for a second. Look around your Zoom screen here a little bit. I just launched a poll asking if any of you have taken classes with Chesapeake Region Safety Council. I hope we get a lot of yeses, but don't worry. I think we could change that in the next hour. If you are using a desktop or laptop, you might see that towards the bottom dashboard, you've got a chat feature, you got a Q&A feature with a little question mark. Use it. Ask us questions. Lee is happy to take some questions at the end. We can take questions about the council or classes coming up. If we don't get to all these messages today, that's okay. We'll get back with you. You can reach back out to us via I'm going to put a bunch of links in the chat. So here's a chat right now. I will start off to say good morning, so you know where that feature is. Good morning. There it is. So feel free to use that feature, and we'll get questions towards the end. This meeting is being recorded, so check our website back maybe Monday or Tuesday of next week. The YouTube recording will be available to view and the presentation. So if you have some folks that you want to share this with, feel free to grab that link and send it off to all your friends, family, and coworkers. We think that you will enjoy it, and I think that it would be a good thing to share. So check out under safety webinars on our website so that you can get this out to all the people that you feel should be watching it. I'd like to introduce Dave Medeiros. Dave, you want to say good morning to the fine folks here?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dave Medeiros. I'm the president of the Chesapeake Region Safety Council. And you know what? What's not to like? It's Friday. The sun's out. The weather's warm. Okay. It's summertime. All right. And we're getting ready to learn something. And years ago, there was a great basketball coach out of the DC metropolitan area. If anybody's an old high school basketball fan, you'll remember the name Morgan Wooten. He coached at DeMatha Catholic High School in Washington, D.C. It's right outside of D.C. in Hyattstown. But the one thing he said, sports is a great vehicle to learn the lessons of life. He talked about that and he used that to teach kids through playing basketball about life's lessons. And it kind of is really exciting today because Lee Watson is going to talk about the sport of auto racing and how it's going to help teach us the lessons about safety, and we can learn. It's not necessarily always a construction site or a manufacturing facility or well, maybe it is a vehicle crash in Lee's case, but we have an opportunity to really learn something from somebody who participated in safety in a little bit different place than we're used to hearing about it. And I think Lee has got an awesome presentation for us today. Just real quick, in 2023, there were 222,698 unintentional injury deaths in the United States. And you say, whoa. And we know why these things happen. There's overdoses from opioids, there's vehicle crashes, there's falls from elevations, those top things. How well do we pay attention to them? And when it carries over into the workplace, when you think about the same time period, 5,283 fatalities in the workplace in 2023. And we think about what we are doing each and every day in our jobs to try to help address fundamental concerns that enable people to have failures being incidents resulting in injury or death. And when you think about those numbers, at the same period of time, 62 million people sought medical attention as a result of an unintentional injury as well. And it's like, wow, that's a big number. That's almost 20% of the population of the United States. So we're always looking for good ways to learn more about safety, good ways to relate it to people and what they're doing each and every day. And I got to tell you, Lee has a very unique way of explaining safety because of his life experience. And man, I can't thank Lee enough for presenting this to us today. And I'm jacked up, as you can see. And it didn't even take the coffee. It just talked about safety. We're jacked. And so, Lee, I want to thank you very much for providing this presentation for us today. And I am going to turn this back over to the wonderful Miss Kim Beard. So thank you all. Enjoy it. And I'm just saying, you're here for a ride today, and Lee's going to take you on that ride. So thanks, Lee, and thank you all for showing up.
We're here for a ride. Yes. Okay, Christy, would you kindly introduce our presenter?
Of course, and Dave did such a great introduction. But just to let you know a little bit more about Lee and who he is and where he comes from and why we asked him to speak today. But currently, Lee is the EHS Training Manager for Virginia Tech Environmental Health and Safety. But prior to joining Virginia Tech, he spent 10 years with NASCAR in a variety of roles focused on safety, emergency response, and training. So, but during his tenure, he helped the team help NASCAR from a very challenging position to a worldwide leader in motorsports and safety. So this, you're going to see how he did that in this webinar. But Lee is a graduate of Virginia Tech, also Liberty University, and also Radford University of Carilion. And he has been a practicing paramedic for over 33 years. He's a frequent speaker at state and national events on complex topics such as ethics, high energy trauma, safety, and training. But some of you might really know Lee because maybe, just maybe, you took a course and you were one of the people that said, yes, I've taken a course with CRSC, and yes, it was with Lee. So maybe that was the case. But if not, you have time still because Lee is still an instructor with us as well. So may I introduce Lee Watson?
Thank you, Christy, Kim, and Dave. And Dave, 6 degrees of separation. Coach Wooten recruited my neighbor, Jeff Adkins, who eventually wound up playing at the University of Maryland for Lefty Driesell back in the day. And Jeff was part of the Lenny Bias squad back in the ACC heyday. So that's an interesting connection there. But yeah, I was spent a lot of time playing basketball with Jeff in the front yard. He was good, I wasn't. But I got to see a lot of the coach parade and everything else that came through as they were recruiting him. So that's a cool 6 degrees of separation for all of us. So I want to thank everybody for taking a little bit of time out of your Friday morning to join us. I'm going to go ahead and drop the share on here. And everybody, if you're not familiar with Zoom, you can adjust your toolbar. There's a section up there where you can adjust your view to incorporate whatever you may or may not want to see as we go through this. This session, you know, it's taken me 20 plus years to get to a point where I actually felt comfortable having this conversation with folks. And a lot of it comes out of my teaching the 500, 501, 502, 503, 510, and 511 for CRSC, because we focus on a lot of topics as we teach those. But this is an opportunity to maybe put that through a different lens. I'm not going to share anything that's earth shattering for most of you, especially like, you know, Johnny, I know you and I have talked, you've heard me talk about training. I know Mark has heard me talk about training quite a bit. But one of the things that I've noticed as we've taught all this for years is, you know, there's just some underlying things, some ways of putting this together. And when I stopped and started thinking about my own journey as part of the safety multiverse, it kind of hit me pretty hard that there are some things that we probably need to take away from all this. Now, I know not everybody is a NASCAR fan. A lot of people don't realize that in a period of 9 months, from May the 12th of 2000 to February the 12th of 2001, there were 4 drivers killed in competition in NASCAR. And of course, most everybody will recognize the name Dale Earnhardt. Dale was just the 4th in a line of drivers that were killed in 9 months. And they all died from the exact same injury pattern. Now, to put that in perspective, if you're in construction, that's like, you know, 4 of your employees walking off the 5th floor of an unguarded building that's under construction and dying. I mean, you know, to have 4 folks die from the same injury pattern, you know, most people don't think about Adam and Kenny and Tony. Everybody knows Dale Earnhardt. There was a really interesting video I watched just since I did this talk with the annual meeting last week. Somebody sent me a link to a video, and it was how NASCAR safety changed. And what just bothered me was the entire focus was on how the sport changed after Dale Earnhardt died. It wasn't just Dale. And then I got to thinking about, wait a minute, wait a minute. Dale Earnhardt was also the last NASCAR driver to die on the racetrack in the 3 national series. So with that, you know, for me, my journey with NASCAR started in 2001 after Dale. I got asked to do some research and some documentation and some planning, and that led to me joining them full time. And in that role, I did a ton of stuff over the years. You know, I jokingly told everybody that I had the simplest job description ever written, 2 words. When I got hired, it was by Bill France Jr., Mike Helton, and Gary Smith. And the exact job description I was given when I was hired and brought in full time was never again. Just that simple, never again. And in some ways, it was the easiest job description, and is also the hardest job I've ever had. Because as you all know, safety is a dynamic thing. There are so many variables, so many things that come into play into what we do each and every day. You know, it required me to do things like actually drive an Indy car, like actually drive a stock car, not during competition, but just so that I can say, you know what, I have an understanding of why the driver might feel a certain way. An understanding from the medical side. Obviously, with my history as a paramedic, that was pretty straightforward. But, you know, we had to look at everything, and it wasn't just me. So let me ask you all a question. You can drop this in chat. If I say NASCAR and safety, what words come to mind? Feel free to just, pop it in chat. If I say that, what comes to mind for any of you? Anybody? Hans device. Yeah, Mark. Helmet, better. So the question that I had, KED, interesting story about KED. Jennifer, I assume you're talking about a Kendrick extrication device. Crumple zones on cars. You know what? One of the interesting things about NASCAR, and that was just an interesting aside with this. One of the things we learned after we started changing the car, the KED didn't work. The Velcro, especially with the seat coverings and the things that were in the car, it didn't work. We had to come up with a whole new shortboard just for that. Everybody planned on using the KED to extricate a driver. That's what we did from EMS from the 80s and the 90s forward. And then we realized the whole plan, nope, doesn't work. We'll get to that in a second. So, I was very fortunate to be a part of a team. And I want to be very clear, Tom Blanchett, Mike Phillips, it's one of those things, Sean, the name and the list of people that were involved, John Padlack, an engineer, Daniel Honeycutt, an engineer, Dean Sickings from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. The names of the peoples that were involved. So I want to be very clear. This was not just a solo effort. I just happened to be the one kind of helping rearrange the pieces on the board and put the puzzle together. There was a lot of work by a lot of folks over 10 years or so right after Dale. But the question I want to start off with is, how did this happen? How did we go from 4 drivers in 9 months? How did NASCAR get to a point where 4 drivers in 9 months even happened? Because you'd think, by the way, there's no OSHA. NASCAR is a company that has enough political and social capital and enough financial capital. There's nobody riding shotgun over them. There's no compliance. By the way, everybody's an independent contractor. So, there wasn't an OSHA looking over the shoulder saying, hey, you've had 4 people get killed. You need to do something different. What made this happen? Well, I can tell you, it's the word we talk about all the time, and it was the culture. NASCAR's opinion at the time was simple. Safety is the driver and team responsibility. What systems they want to use or not use is entirely up to them. The Hans device and another device that was a little lesser known called the Hutchins device were both available in 2001. Did anybody use them? Only about 10 drivers were using these in the Daytona 500 in 2001. NASCAR's saying, hey, we're here to make sure that it's fair and it's competitive. Safety's your responsibility. Well, the teams, we're not going beyond the rules because of weight, balance, horsepower. And hey, if it was really important, NASCAR would make a rule. And the drivers were like, I'm not doing anything. I mean, even Dale was like, I'm wearing an open face helmet because I feel like that full face helmet, interferes with my ability to see. Or it's too hot. How many of you hear those kind of things all the time? PPE, it's too hot. I can't work as well with it. We hear those arguments all the time, don't we? How many of you have heard that argument? Raise your hand. Use the emotion down there on the bottom, right? All the time. All the reasons. All of the reasons. If it was important, you'd mandate it. As early as 1998 and 1999, I actually approached NASCAR about making some changes, and I physically got thrown out of the office building in Daytona. A small office park is where they were headquartered, much like where CRSC is at today. And I went up and I tried to talk to them about making some changes, and they're like, no, that the tracks or the tracks handle the track stuff, and the drivers handle their safety stuff, and we're not touching that. Go away, young man, go away. And then 4 drivers in 9 months. Actually, that getting thrown out is what caused me personally to get remembered. And that's why when they decided we might want to consider change, that's actually how I wound up getting the phone call, which is kind of crazy. Life is funny that way sometimes. But as we look at what happened in the culture, we can all relate to the culture, because I relate the culture of NASCAR in 2000 to a lot of what I see and hear with safety culture in business today. And there are all kinds of reasons. There are all kinds of, I don't want to necessarily call them excuses, because they're not, they're just the way things are. It is, some people like to say, well, Lee, this is just the real world. Oh, it's just the real world. Well, you know what? People die in the real world, and we have an opportunity to do something about that. At least that's my perception, my belief. That's part of why we're talking today. So as we looked at how NASCAR changed, I was able to kind of gin this down to a few lessons, if you will. And the first one, if you've been through a 510, 511, 500, or 501 with me, you've heard something along these lines. The 510 and the 511 are great courses. They help you learn a lot about the standards and the regulatory requirements associated with what we do. It is a great background course. But if you focus exclusively on compliance, it's going to lead you astray. Our focus has to be on the hazards and the risk, not just on compliance. Now, I'm going to share a picture here with you. This is a Cup car, a NASCAR race car from 2001. And I can tell you right now, we knew as early as the 1970s that short duration, millisecond duration head impacts would cause a basilar skull fracture. When you look at these two pictures, this was a rules compliant car. But again, you know, if you want to, let's see, can we use, you all have access to the reactions, right? Show of hands, does any of you actually think this was, if you think this is a safe car, raise your hand. It's rules compliant. It met all of the rules to be on the racetrack in Daytona and subsequent races in 2001. But look at the head surround there. Look at what's going on in the car there. What causes a basilar skull fracture is basically we've restrained the torso. When you look at the seat belts, even when you think about the car you drive down I-95, I-81, or across 66, wherever you may be in the eastern part of the U.S., if we restrain the pelvis and the torso, but not the head, what happens when you have a high energy impact with the head? It snaps forward or it snaps to the side. When you look at this picture, there's nothing to control the movement of the head at all. This was rule compliant, but was it safe? The answer is no. We learned that 4 times over in 2000 and 2001. You know, my friend Tommy Blanchett, unfortunately, he was the EMS director at New Hampshire. He actually worked both of Adam and Kenny's fatalities. He was one of the big voices for change. But when you look at this, compliance and safety may go hand in hand, but just because you're compliant doesn't mean you're safe. If you want to be safe, you have to start off by focusing on the hazards and the things that we know are out there that will hurt and or kill our folks. Now, that leads me to the second big lesson I want to share with you. Now, show of hands again. How many of you have a safety chicken little somewhere around your workplace? Somebody that actually says every 2 seconds, oh, somebody that could kill somebody, that could kill somebody, that could kill somebody, that could kill somebody. We need to fix this right now. We've got to fix this right now. Do any of you have that kind of person in your workplace? Or do you know a safety professional that that's how they approach safety? There are a lot of them out there. And that's okay. It's good that they're recognizing things. But one of the lessons that was probably one of the harder ones at NASCAR, there are a lot of things that go on, not just in racing, but in business and industry and construction that can kill you. Okay. We can all, there are all kinds of things. Simply driving to work. I mean, I drove 95 from Baltimore to Richmond last Friday. Talk about taking your life in your own hands. That was an adventure, and that's why I try to stick to the train, honestly. That can kill you. But there are some things out there that we know with a high degree of certainty that will kill you. Contact with an energized electrical source, 480 volt, 600 volt class stuff, that will kill you. Fall greater than 15 feet, significantly higher mortality, that will kill you. That's why OSHA has the Focus 4, right? There are a lot of things that can kill you, but understanding the difference between what can kill you and what will kill you is a really important distinction. When we start focusing our efforts, we've got to address the things that will kill you first. That's why after Dale Earnhardt's death, one of the first moves made to try and start getting things under control was the requirement for head and neck restraint, to unitize the head with the rest of the body so that in these incidents that had a high degree of, high delta in terms of kinetic energy, where the energy is going, making sure the head and the whole rest of the body stay as a unitized package, because that greatly impacted mortality. That, we knew 4 basilar skull fractures. Well, that will kill you. And I don't normally use a lot of what I would consider fatality video, but I want to share this with you all. So this is Tony Roper in October.
Jeremy, I'm still looking around to see if there was a third truck involved. Here we go.
Well, here's the incident
Correct.
here, and interesting, Roper, look at that hit, almost straight in there, and it's almost like Grissom was
straight
checking
in to the wall at the flag stand at Texas Motor Speedway. You think about, some of you may have seen Dale Earnhardt's wreck in Daytona in February 2012. Tony Roper's wreck looked a lot more violent, but it was essentially the same wreck, just a slightly different angle of impact on the front and the same mechanism, the same injury, and unfortunately the same result. By the time Tony Roper's truck came to rest, he was unfortunately deceased. I hate that. You'd think after the first or the second or the third, somebody would have said, hey, let's get a handle on this. But the culture was so rigid and so significantly embedded that they looked at each one of these as individual incidents rather than looking at them as a systemic problem. Which brings me to the third thing: change should never be driven by a fatality. Show of hands, how many of you have heard the statement or been a part of a situation where somebody makes the comment, the right person hasn't died yet? Anybody else? I see Jennifer's hand up. A few of you. Yeah. Well, the right person hasn't died yet. In all of those cases, do we already know what's wrong, what needs to change, what the problem is? I mean, in NASCAR, even after Adam's fatality, they knew the mechanism. So why not do something? You know, as a safety professional, I kind of take lesson 2 and 3 and roll them together. When we look at, we understand what will kill somebody, and we understand that we want to prevent that fatality or that significant loss in terms of function for the person. Those have got to be priorities for us. Those have got to be things we attack. Those have got to be things that we spend our, emotional and working capital on to effect change. Oh yeah, Jennifer, all the time. I can tell you how many, and I won't speak specifically of Montgomery County and Blacksburg in the area where I live now, but if I were to go back over my 30+ year career as a medic, the number of times I have been somewhere and somebody said, well, the right person hadn't died yet, or, well, we're going to get to it. When you've had the same intersection, there've been 9 fatalities in 6 years with the same thing. Well, we know there needs to be a change. And thank you, Gene. Thank you for the comment. So, show of hands. Again, how many of you have had arguments with your employees about wearing and using their PPE properly? Especially things like safety glasses. Isn't that a fun time? So, one of the lesson 4 here is one that is hard to accept. As a safety professional, most of the time we are not the penultimate or the top of the pile with regard to making decisions. Sometimes people override us, overrule us in terms of things that we think we want to do or change. One of the hardest things for me to learn at NASCAR was to accept the wins and accept the losses. Because as a safety professional, you're going to have to accept some things that sometimes you may not even entirely agree with. I speak to what my job description was. Never again. Pretty powerful. But then a few weeks later, some of the same folks in leadership said, by the way, you realize that in some ways you are just window dressing, right? You're here so that we can say we're doing something to respond to a really challenging event. And if you know me at all, you challenge accepted. But how many times do we wind up in that same position where they want us to be a safe organization, provide a safe workplace, but then at the same time, we're short of resources or short of the things that we need to be effective? Part of being a safety leader to me is understanding the things you've got to fight really hard for. And one of the things that we fought really hard for was PPE. Now, if you think about it, being on the racetrack is a fairly unique work environment. And if you think in terms of, PPE requirements, they're put forth by OSHA, the PPE always has to relate back to the hazards that we can't control through any other means, right? So I'm asking people to go out on the racetrack, which may, be banked up to 32, 34 degrees. It may be covered in oil. They may be dealing with a 3D flammable liquid fire. There are all kinds of hazards that are fairly unique. And a lot of the PPE that was being worn in 2000 was insufficient. So over the years, we were able to start making some changes with that. Now, I say all that about accepting wins and losses and PPE and bringing that in because our philosophy, and as a matter of fact, if you looked in the recommendations, which then became guidelines, which then became the standards, there was a requirement based on your role as to what kind of PPE you had to have on the racetrack. And there was a certain group of individuals, Dwayne Barnes was one of them, that drove jet dryers on the racetrack. And a jet dryer is nothing more than a jet engine with a directional output and anywhere from, 150 to 350, 400 gallons of kerosene mounted on a pickup truck. And they never get out of the truck and all these things. And the guys that drove the jet dryers said, we're not wearing PPE. We don't even get out on the racetrack, Lee. We never do any of that stuff. We don't need PPE. Y'all can see where this is going, right? So I thought, and my position as the safety guy was always anyone going on the racetrack needs to have appropriate levels of personal protective equipment. And I thought that right down to Mr. Mike Helton, who was the president of NASCAR at the time, sent Mike a note, said, hey, look, we've got most everybody situated, but I still got these guys that say they only drive the jet dryers, they don't need PPE. So that went back and forth for a while, like 6 months. And finally, Mike told me to just drop it. Got that in an email. Just don't worry about it. We've tried to get them on board. They don't, their risk probably isn't that bad. We all get put in those positions at times as safety personnel. And then you have something like by the way, the driver has
and
on
now under caution, Juan Pablo Montoya has crashed and gone aflame.
Holy cow, what happened? We just got a report that he was complaining about a bad vibration in every gear.
No, Larry, he just slammed
into the jet driver.
I think he slammed into the jet driver.
You saw the guy in yellow, he had on PPE. The firefighters are in red, they have PPE on. The medics are in blue, they have PPE on. You'll see folks in white here in just a second. Those are my NASCAR officials. They have PPE on.
They're trying to clear debris off the racetrack, and the car brakes, won't steer, and he slides up the track
into
the back of that surplus helicopter jet engine on a trailer used to dry the racetrack.
Mike, I saw sparks coming out from the car as if it had a tire down or something. What an incredible turn of events. I've never in my life. Oh my gosh.
And all that spilled jet fuel.
And all of that spilled jet fuel ignited. And if you look to the left third of your screen, you see a person in yellow in PPE helping a person wearing jeans and a short sleeve shirt down the racetrack. Anybody want to guess who that wearing the jeans and the short sleeve shirt is? That's Dwayne. Unfortunately, he passed away from cancer not too long after this incident. But what was really interesting was I talked to him the next morning and he said, Lee, just go ahead and say it. I'm like, what? I'm here to check on you, bud. They kept him in the hospital overnight. And what's up? No, you just need to go ahead and say it. And, he kept going back and forth. I'm like, I don't even know what he said. No, just go ahead and say, I told you so. Dang it, Lee. What was even more funnier to me was Mike Helton telling me, just don't say it. Don't. Hey, Mike, I told you so. Told you not to say it. The next morning he was on TV giving a press conference and said, hey, everybody's going to be that's on the racetrack will be in protective equipment from now on. The hardest thing in the world for me as the safety guy at that time was to accept the fact that I lost that argument about PPE. We were very lucky that Dwayne was okay and that wasn't a worse incident, because if that happens in a different location and that kerosene winds up under the cab, that could have been a very different outcome. It's very hard sometimes to accept the fact that we don't win every argument, even when it's safety related. So to go along with that, I know we all talk all the time about house safety training. How many of you are tired of PowerPoint-based safety training? Show me your hands. How many of you are absolutely tired of PowerPoint-based safety training? Yes. If you take a 5'10", 5'11", 5'01", or 5'02" with me, we limit it to 4 or 5 over the entire week if we can. Why? Because we're all tired of it, right? No, it has a purpose. All kidding aside, PowerPoint has a great purpose, but it's not the be all end all. Training is good. Any training we do to help out with safety is good, but realistic training is better. You know, Bill Jr. told me early on that my access to resources for training was very limited. So my very first trip to the Spirit of Halloween store was to get one of the $29 smoke generators, paid for it out of my pocket. By the way, the smoke you see in that right picture is margarita flavored, led for an interesting training dynamic. But we took secondhand stuff. And by the way, the picture on the left, you can see kind of the black surrounding the helmet. That all is part of the head surround. Again, trying to keep the head and the body moving in the same direction, keep from that movement that we knew caused a basilar skull fracture. But that was a second-hand helmet I got from Simpson, mannequin acquired from the rescue squad. And we put together training that was hands-on, that actually helped prepare our on-track medics, our on-track EMS for that environment. It wasn't perfect, but it also wasn't super expensive. It just required us to get creative. One of the things that I think sometimes we forget, and certainly it became an issue with us at NASCAR, everything that we did, we needed a hands-on component. You know, we can talk about it. The other thing we did was a lot of just-in-time training, because if you came to the racetrack, you got a 1-hour refresher every single day we had on-track activity. It's called a track services meeting. And the whole point of the meeting was to go over the plan for the day and the what ifs. What if X happened? What if Y happened? Because when it comes to that, we had to prepare mercilessly. How many of you agree with the statement Murphy is a fan of work sites, especially construction sites? He's a race fan too. There's a lot of stuff. You know, we know what will kill somebody, but I go back and we were talking about some of the things. Nobody prepares you for sewage line breaking and leaking raw sewage onto a racetrack. There's no page in the book that prepares you for that. There's no page in the book that prepares you for a pedestrian walkway collapse after the race. There's no page in the book that prepares you for a 2-helicopter crash into a campground hour after the championship night at Homestead, Miami. And there's not even, well, there is a page in the book now about how to deal with animals that get on the racetrack. Yeah, I know that's a page because I wrote that page. There was no specific thing to prepare for with all of this. But what we did was we prepared for everything. We made sure people laughed at me. I said, we need a skid steer. Why? I don't know. I just want one because there's going to be a situation where we're going to need it. And we thought back about things that had happened previously. And said, yeah, we can justify adding that to something we're going to ask for. Instead of having 50 pounds of oil dry or 250, let's have 2 pallets. I can tell you what, having 2 pallets came in really handy with the sewage line break. So we have all of these things. You can't prepare for one of them, but if you prepare mercilessly and you train mercilessly and you have checklist after checklist and you play that little game of what if X, Y, or Z happens, then when X, Y, and Z happen, you're much better prepared. Even though you didn't necessarily prepare exactly for it, you have a plan. You can work with the resources and the things you have. Now, that said, sometimes things are a little crazy. one of the other big lessons for us was that crazy ideas aren't always crazy. Now, any of you in this call that are fire and EMS, if you've got a fire, EMS, public safety background, do me a favor and raise your hand. Jennifer, you do? Gabriel, Alistair, yeah, we got a few. So if we talk about extrication for a minute, is it fair to say that we always teach and we've always believed we extricate from whatever the final resting position of the vehicle is? If you agree with that statement, raise your hand. You know, Jennifer, I know some of you, that's what we do, right? Gabriel, that's what we've always done. Public safety, we extricate from the final resting position. So in 2004, Mike Waltrip wound up on the roof. And it didn't go well because what we realized, if a race car is on its roof, all right, you can't necessarily get in through the side of the vehicle. It's not like a street vehicle where you can pop a door and have access. You certainly can't come in through the bottom. And so after Mike Waltrip, they came to us and they said, okay, we need to figure out how to handle a vehicle that's on its roof. And the idea that was like number 148 out of 150 on the desk was roll it back over. Because all of us that were involved in public safety had been trained over and over again that we extricate from final rest. Well, none of the first 147, none of them actually sounded great. We started testing all this stuff, and that crazy idea of roll it back over, that turned out to be the thing that was best, because when because of the driver's position in the car and the fact that they're restrained the way they are, we were creating a mechanical asphyxia, not all that different than what we talk about with excavations. And we found out that instead of having 10 or 15 minutes to work with this, we really had 4 to get that driver back down into a much more normal position to take the load off the driver. So, and I'll tell you, we had to fight a lot of folks with data and research to show this was the right path. Because everybody wanted, we're not rolling that thing back over, Lee. No, we're not doing it. Turns out that was actually the best thing. And we've actually started using this even on the street some now. That crazy idea of roll it over wasn't really so crazy. This one is what I refer to as a Captain Obvious moment. We forget this sometimes. One of the lessons from Mike and from NASCAR is that every person, every job, every conversation, every viewpoint is important. Because that person that's working the gate as a security guard may have the solution to a problem you don't even realize you have yet. That's just kind of a simple one, isn't it? But how many times, and I just think about how many times as I've taught other people, how many times I've heard folks be dismissive of certain things. We can't afford to be that. And that goes right along to kind of my last major point with this. Safety requires investment. How many of you agree with that? Safety requires investment. A great source of investment is to pursue training with Chesapeake Region Safety Council. Just saying, I got to throw that out there. Kim loves to hear me say things like that, so I've got to throw it in there. But safety requires investment. And one of the things that came out of 4 fatalities in 9 months is a $10 million plus 60,000 square foot facility dedicated to safety. It also was dedicated to improving competition, towards improving certain other aspects. But the NASCAR Research and Development Center, when I started working there, I was one of the first folks to have an office there because I didn't have an office before that. There were 18 of us in the building. Now I think it's over 50, 55 people. Engineers, people from GM, people from Ford, people from all different backgrounds focused on cost control, competition, and safety. It was huge. The FIA does not have anything like it. IndyCar does not have anything like it. No other motorsport sanctioning body has made that kind of investment in safety. And I think that is a huge part of it. Why did NASCAR go from 4 and 9 months to none in over 24 years? Because they invested in change. All right. Now, I've got a couple of quick corollaries here. We're getting down to the end of this. I've got a couple of quick corollaries. How many of you on this call today are supervisors, managers of some type? Have some type of responsibility for other people? All right. Few of you. So this is a lesson specifically for those of you in a supervisory role. There are only 4 answers. Teach your employees. There are only 4 answers. When you approach something and you're trying to get to the bottom of something, there are only 4 answers. Number 1, yes, sir, or yes, ma'am. And I've been told that Gen Z and some other millennials take offense to things like yes, sir, and yes, ma'am. Please take it in context. The second one, if the first one is yes, sir, or yes, ma'am, the second one is no, sir, no, ma'am. I want you to think about this. How many times have you had employees start to tell you a tale and the whole time you're thinking is just, please stop talking, please, right? We've all been there. Mike Helton gave me these when I first started working there. He said, if you just remember these 4 answers, to just stick to these 4 answers and teach your guys to just work with these 4 answers, you're going to have a long career with us. And I did, over 10 years. Third one is, I'm all over it. That means I understand the problem. I know what needs to happen, and I'm going to take care of it. You don't need to do anything but let me handle it, boss. I got you. And then there's number 4. I screwed up. Won't happen again. Wouldn't that be so much easier than somebody try and tell us a great big old long tale? Brevity is beautiful as a supervisor. You know, brevity is beautiful. So as you're working with your folks, it even got to the point where I know there was a case in Charlotte where I was working on the racetrack during a race, and the record guys did something that I wasn't expecting them to do, and then I mishandled the situation briefly. And I heard Mike get on the radio and say, he started in, he's like, Lee, what? And I just held up that right there because I knew the camera was on us, and I knew he could see it. All I did was hold up 4 fingers, and all I heard was laughter. Copy that, answer 4. Got it covered. Brevity is a good thing. So my interaction with Bill France Jr. was pretty limited. Most of my conversations and stuff with Bill Jr. came from Gary Smith, who was a close personal friend of Bill. But in a couple of meetings when I first started out, he gave me a humdinger of one here. As a safety professional, we all need to remember we're also part of a larger business organization, and you got to sign the back of the check more than you sign the front. We have to remember that. We have to be fiscally responsible with the things that we do. You know, I go back to when I was trying to accumulate resources for training. I had this idea that NASCAR was going to have money to provide me with resources to do training. And I was sorely mistaken because that's when Bill said, son, I signed the back of the check, not the front. Start working, look at the rule book, figure out what you need, and find a way to get it that doesn't cost me money. And we did. There's actually a section in the NASCAR rule book that said I could take a chassis. Jack Roush and I didn't see eye to eye on that, but I got one of those Mark Martin number 6 Viagra cars after an impact at Charlotte. I said, that one, please. And the rule book allowed me to take it. And we used that thing for 4 years in training in different environments. We wound up using it to determine what happens when when a car lands on it. We dropped that thing from a crane like 18 times just to see what damage profile happened with an instrumented dummy in it. This is a cool thing to do. But we had to find the resources because we're in business. We can't sign the front of the check more than we sign the back. And if I'm going to give you one like that, I've got to give you my last one here. There's always time for ice cream. Folks, what we do is serious business. Safety is serious. We know what can hurt or kill the folks that work for us. But we also have to take time and remember safety is 100% about relationships. You know, Mark Nestor, who's I think is on the call with us now. Mark is one of our inspectors. And it's not about being a compliance officer that goes in and tells people everything they're doing wrong. It's about building relationships with the departments that he's responsible for over years so that we can get to safe. Bill Jr. made relationships over ice cream sandwiches. And if he offered you an ice cream and you tried to say, I don't have time, his exact answer was, son, there's always time for ice cream. Now tell me about how's your day going? What do you need to do your job better? It was huge. Relationships are the core of what we do. So don't ever forget, take time and enjoy the ice cream. Now, I'm going to wrap us up and go to questions. Nothing I've said today is earth-shattering for the 24 of you in this room. You know all this. You know this. All I've done is put it together, because if we focus on compliance, if we focus on inspections and toolbox talks, that's good, but you got to step back and focus on the bigger picture. You know, this is a quote from Bill Jr.'s dad, Bill France Sr., when he formed NASCAR in 1947. And the only change I make to this, and I kid you not, I've got literally right here on my desk is the full quote. And I've also got it, somebody gave me a very nice pencil set with this engraved on the lid. Bill said stock car racing as we've been running it. I choose to say nowadays in life, safety as we've been doing it is not, in my opinion, the answer. We're all of us here today, all 29 of us in this room right now, we're all interested in one thing, and that is making things better, making things safer, improving the present conditions. The answer lies in this group to do it. The challenge is not to just do safety as we have been. The challenge from me to everyone is get better. Take the 50,000-foot view, take things like these lessons, and look for things that will kill people and address those, address the hazards instead of just the standards. And I think you'll all be surprised at where we can go, where we can get. It's a team effort across the board. That's my contact information here at Virginia Tech. If anybody wants us to reach out, I'll be glad to talk with anyone at any time. I appreciate everyone's time, and I know we just have a few minutes left, so if you have questions, feel free.
Thank you, Lee. Wow. Yeah, thank you, Lee. Christy will check the Q&A. I think, Lee, we all just wanted to sit here all day and listen to your stories. And I wish the folks that I know have 1,000 questions could unmute, but webinar doesn't allow for that. So Christy will be happy to take chat questions, or if you want to pop it in the Q&A. I know you're all dying to ask a question or two. But Dave, if there's anything you'd like to share, I am gonna, while we're looking for some questions and input, I am gonna throw a few links in the chat, and here's what they're gonna be. They're gonna be access to this webinar, because I told you were going to want to share it. Okay, so you can share that early next week. I'm going to launch a poll right now, because after Lee's presentation, I'm just wondering if you will be taking some classes with us at the Chesapeake Region Safety Council.
Hey, Kim, let me interrupt you for 1 second, because there's one thing I do want to say.
Please.
And, you know, I give Kim and Christy and Tanner and Allison a lot of hard time sometimes. CRSC and Mid-Atlantic OTI are two of the best resources you all have out here. In training, yes, but the more important part of it is the networking that they bring to the table. And I look at the room like at the annual meeting last week, or I look when I go up and we teach there or do things. That networking again, the answer lies in the networking and the people you know. Those relationships and the family that you all have access to are what's super duper important. The training is good. You know, they've got some great instructors on some very specialized topics and across the board. But those networks that you create are what will get us to a lower fatality number over time. And that's what the mission of CRSC is. That's what we're all here for. You know, reducing injury is great. The number I want to see go down is fatalities. You know, sorry, Kim, I didn't mean to jump in there.
No, thanks, Lee. Lee and I were just talking the other day about how building your community is your best emergency plan. I really liked hearing that from you, Lee. So the links I'm putting in here are links to where you registered for this webinar so that you can share that with the folks you know. It's a link to the ChesapeakeSC.org website, which is where you go look and see what classes we offer and upcoming events. Our conference we have our own website for our conference that's September 25th. This is where you're going to come build that community. Come on September 25th in Baltimore County for an amazing conference with guest speakers and wonderful exhibitors, some really good food. And it's going to be a wonderful event. So mark that down. I also put my email address there. So if you just have a question, you're like, can I just talk to a human? Go ahead and give Kim Beard an email. It's all good. kbeard@chesapeakesc.org. And then Dave, the last link I put in there, I know you guys can't click on all these links right now. Get your phone out and take a picture of them. You know, copy them into a Word document or email them to yourself for later. But the last link I put in there is a link to our work zone safety pledge. And we have a few people on the call that I haven't had the honor to meet yet. And I wanted to be sure that they had access to that work zone safety pledge. So, all right, so I'll hand it off to Christy and Dave, and if there's any questions in the chat or the Q&A, we'll take them.
I do not see any questions in the chat or in the Q&A. But I think that's because Lee does such a fabulous job of sharing all this information, and it was so very interesting. So thank you, Lee, for all of that. Dave, do you have any final words?
Well, I just appreciate what Lee's got to say, and I love hearing his perspective on things. And the one thing that just keeps striking me is, you know, in compliance doesn't mean you're safe. Okay. And we can do everything in the book that it says to do, but that just means we're in compliance. It doesn't necessarily mean we're safe. We're following the rules. And that one always sticks with me. And I love Lee's practical approach to it and just real life interaction with people and you know, some high profile people too. And I'm just grateful, and I could listen to you talk about it all day long, Lee. So it's a great job, and we look forward to seeing as many of you as can make it out here at the Chesapeake Region Safety Council, because we are about building up teams and networking and all that great stuff. So you got to come. All the cool kids come here. You know what I mean? I always like to say that, and we want you to be one of the cool kids. So we look forward to seeing you in the very near future. And I thank you, and I hope you all have a great weekend as well. So thank you, Christy.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you, Lee.